In example 3a, it says write explicit equations for 4 new functions so that h of x, which is 4 plus 5x plus 2x cubed, is equal to 4 different functions added together. And there's an infinite amount of right answers for this. For example, can you see if I want to get 4 plus 5x plus 2x cubed, I could go 4 plus 4x plus 1x plus 2x cubed? Would that not make the same thing? And so when we want to describe, well, I made f of x 4, I made g of x 4x, I made n of x x, and I made m of x 2x cubed. And because there's an infinite amount of right answers, these usually don't show up on the final exam because they don't like to have to check everybody's answer every time. Plus, you could also do things like this, which kind of somewhat defeats the purpose, but it's not wrong. What if I made f of x, the first one, equal to the exact same thing that I wanted? What would g of x, n of x, and m of x be? They could all be zeros, right? It would still be the same thing, but kind of defeat the purpose of it. Same thing in b, right? What happens if I made f of x equal to the exact same thing that we started with? What would g of x have to be? 0. Subtracting 0 wouldn't change it. I mean, you could make f of x 4 plus 5x, and then g of x a negative 2x cubed, and subtracting the negative would make it positive. That would work as well. So there's more than one right answer for something like this. Now moving on to example 4, it's the same idea, but now we're multiplying. In 4a, you need 2 things to multiply to get x squared minus 9. If I factor it to x plus 3 and x minus 3, well then I could make f of x the x plus 3, I could make g of x the x minus 3, and everything would work out. But if I kind of wanted to, that's not cheating. If I made f of x exactly what p of x was, x squared minus 9, what would g of x have to be to make that work? Can't be 0, because times by 0 would be 0. It would be 1. And that kind of defeats the purpose, but it works. And same thing in b. If you made f of x exactly what you started with, x plus 1, then what would I have to divide by not to change it? G of x would equal 1. The only thing you have to be a little bit careful in b is why can't I make f of x x plus 1 and x plus 2 and g of x x plus 2? Because if they were divided, couldn't I just cancel these out? Wouldn't it make x plus 1? It would, but it would have a hole in the graph. And if g of x is x plus 1, it doesn't have a hole in the graph. It doesn't say anywhere it's x plus 1 with a hole. It's just x plus 1. So this would have to be a half mark off because that graph has a hole, whereas the original graph doesn't have a hole. In which case, a best answer would be something like this. Or you could have added a 2 and have a 2 on the bottom, and they would cancel out. But there would be no hole. That would be fine as well. So the questions for example 3 and 4 are 7 and 8.